All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Why We Vote. We hope that everybody's having a great night. Come in, tap in. We're going to have some great conversation. We have Lamont Styles, who's on with us, also hosting, as well as our guest, Deaunte. So thank you guys for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Peace and greetings.
Hey, Lamont, you there? I think Lamont had to tap
Yeah,
out for a little
he
bit.
just needed a second, but I just really appreciate y'all inviting me.
Hello,
I'm very,
everyone. I'm just trying to share the share the show.
yeah,
Yeah.
we appreciate that. I wanted to just introduce myself briefly to everybody. Deaunte Damper, pronouns he, him, his. I am the community organizer for an organization called Vocal Washington. And what Vocal Wa is Voices of Community Activists and Leadership. It's a grassroots organization which in the past has worked with Vocal New York, which is like a brother and sister to us. But we want to make sure that we're advocating and creating leadership development and public education for our community members. And that's uplifting their community voices. Mainly one of the main spaces that we work in is advocating for people with that may have a health disparity such as HIV, but myself with lived experience, as well as people that have used substances, and trying to find a better way to help navigate that. And I think another way that we can be able to do that is uplift these community voices and uplift communities' calls to action. Recently, we just did an opioid recovery task force that we did last year, and this year, we are working with different organizations to make sure we're uplifting those community voices. We know in Federal Way that y'all have been dealing with a lot of different changes, and Vocal's on its way to make sure that we can continue to try to do that for a community out there. So I'm very happy to be in this space because voting is so important.
So yeah, we're just not gonna just gloss over what you just said. You know what I'm saying? Because you said a lot, and we were gonna again, pardon me, I was trying to share the show on Facebook, but we're not just gonna gloss over what you said because what we were talking about before we went live, and when you were talking, what came to my mind was more so what does that look like? You know what I'm saying? So again, when you spoke on like policies, so let's say what you just said as far as um the AIDS, you know what I'm saying? And so I think a lot of people don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like we kind of like don't have these conversations and then they come up and it's like, okay, let's rally behind it. But I would definitely be rallying behind, and that was just one thing that you said. You said something else, and I was like, well, what is the policies and how do we make change? You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think a lot of people understand how to make change. You know what I'm saying? So that's why we have the show Why Vote, because when we say we want to make change, when you look at the policies, sometimes the policies, the way they're written, like say we're going for something specific, they'll throw something else in there, and then it'll make people not want to go vote for it because you added something onto that. So I just wanted to specifically what you just said, what does that look like and how can we support different movements through policies and things of that nature?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think that what made me start getting into policy because I was working with different boards in the early stages of me working back in community like 2018, and a bill stuck out to me, which was It was a referendum. It was Referendum 90, and what Referendum 90 was implementing sexual education inside the school, and that is prevention education. That is letting youth know about their pronouns, and those things are really essential. Growing up, I did not. I knew I had a teacher die of AIDS And as I went through school, I was past the condom, but other than that, I wasn't educated on prevention in the areas of of self, right? On safety. Growing up, I was teased a lot because I was a different orientation, right? And there was no pronouns, okay? You were the F word, and you stick up for yourself later, right? Um, and and keep in mind, I was also someone who was also whose innocence was taken away from me as a child. And when I look at that, right, Referendum 90 was exactly that. More information on letting young kids know what inappropriate touch is, letting young kids know if your pronouns, if your identity is he him, if your pronouns are he him his, and they'll be respected as such, or she her or them they. And I think it's really important to above all else, prevention in our community. When we talk about HIV in our community, 1 out of 2 gay Black men are diagnosed with HIV, or have been diagnosed with HIV since 2020. That is a big deal. That is a big deal because we know that because yes, the Adults does a great job of being progressive, and they do have wonderful programs out here. But how many of us are getting prevention? How many of us are getting information about prophylaxis, also known as PEP, which you can be able to a medication that you can be able to take to prevent you from catching HIV. I know some people that got it, but they're not Black, And I think that it's really important. So Referendum 90 got me into looking more into policy and more into actually not just into policy of trying to advocate for our community to learn how to build their own table. What is affecting us? We're talking about voting in our community, but sister, what do you want to vote about? Do you want to talk about your children's safety? Do you want to talk about more funding for people in the areas of pre-apprenticeship? Do you want to talk about a different alternative to the juvenile justice system? These are certain things that we could be able to take to our state legislators, and have those continued conversations. One of those people that does a really great job with that, well, 2 of them, have been your Federal Way folks, Jesse Johnson and Jamila Taylor. Having those community conversations, because when September hits, they already know how to come back and show up for you. So that answers the question. That's one of the policies that I thought about, but I want to continue partnerships with such as your organization and Eileen's out there to start building more conversations. So then when they do go out there and they have a policy that they think is written for us, we say, no, this is what community's been talking about. 1,000%. There are overdoses that are happening out there in your city right now. How many policies are out there assisting some of the community members as opposed to taking them to SCORE?
Right.
Because SCORE is not
restorative justice.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of just locking people up, And I think that a lot of people they think that their vote doesn't matter, or they think that, oh, well, my voice doesn't matter. It doesn't, but it does. It really does. And having these kinds of conversations with community, like you were saying, is so, so important, because if they're not, if people in the community just, everyday average, whatnot, if they're not going and speaking to the legislators, at least speak to, these different organizations that can speak up for you, so that we can, help to, have some policy change, and fight for them.
Absolutely.
So so like, and this is why my man Deaunte, man, like, I really, when I see what you do in the community, you know what I'm saying? Like it's very inspiring, right? And so, like, when I hear you speak, I feel like it's a bigger conversation, right? Because when we say why vote, when we get to that point, to where you're talking about right there, like you said so much in that, you know what I'm saying? Like, you touched on a lot of things that, in my opinion, we should be having these conversations early on. And that's why I push for community outreach, so we can have these conversations. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, like growing up, like you like your truth, you know what I'm saying? Like how you were picked on growing up and things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? Like I was one of those kids, you know what I'm saying, that probably picked on you, you know what I'm saying? Or was not even picked on you, but was following what somebody else was doing to uh uh what do you not control, but um kind of like push me in a certain way. Influence is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
To influence, right? And so I feel like because we don't have the conversation, right? So let's take for instance, and so this I'm gonna bring it around to voting, but so take for instance, if we have a vote on a sex ed bill, or because we actually interviewed Claire Wilson on here, you know what I'm saying, when she Senator Claire Wilson, shout out to her, you know what I'm saying?
Big shout out to her. Big shout out
Yeah.
to her.
And so when she put her sex ed bill out there and she defended it, like it really wasn't, everybody in the room was like, oh, that's not what I thought it was. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of it's just like Jesse Johnson's police accountability bill. You know what I'm saying? The police came out and was like, oh, we can't do our job. And it's like, that's really not true. You know what I'm saying? And so, but it was what is perceived how the bill or the rollout or whatever the case, right? So I feel like when we have these conversations, like if you just hit me with a sex ed bill and we're not talking about some of the things that you talked about, you know what I'm saying? Like um the touching that's going on in our homes and in our in our communities that we're not talking about. You know what I'm saying? We're
Right.
not having these conversations. And then when we talk about homosexuality, anything like that, it's from a emotional, maybe even religious lens, you know what I'm saying? And it's not really factual, or it's not really based off of the actual people that we're talking about, you know what I'm saying? So
Right.
like how do you have this conversation? So it's like I remember the first time that I talked to I was at Highline and I was talking to a brother, one of my teachers, and he was like, and I'm gonna bring this around to why vote, you know what I'm saying? And so shout out to my man D Bryce. He brought one of my instructors in, and he was like, I was, star football, football player, D1 scholarship, prom queen, whatever, king, I'm sorry. And he was like, and I'm gay, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, yo. And then he was like, and he pointed at me, he was like, yeah. And I know this is gonna take Lamont by surprise, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, damn, dog, you just gonna call me out? And I felt a certain type of way, you know what I'm saying? And then I just was like, why you didn't tell me? Why, you know what I'm saying? I'm going all this. And then it was like, damn. And then I went through this whole process of, like I said, shout out to Yoshiko Harden, shout out to Dale Bryce, you know what I'm saying? They just worked me through this whole process of why I thought the way that I thought. And then it was like, you know what? This is bigger than me. You know what I'm saying? This is not for me to judge. This is not for me to, you know what I'm saying? And so when we talk about legislation, my mind thinks differently. It's not coming from a religious standpoint. It's not coming from a this is how I feel standpoint. This is, how does this affect the people that are involved? You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like the education, you know what I'm saying? I feel like having these conversations helps us to put forth the right legislation that can help people to navigate through this system that we live in. You know what I'm saying? And so, like I said, it's why vote, but there's so many different reasons why we need to get involved. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not telling you what to think or how to vote or how to. It's just like, man, this is our community.
Yeah.
This is how we feel about certain things, and how do we solve these issues so where we can live harmoniously at the end of the day. Because like I said before, what do you want? Kings and queens? Dictatorship? Like I'm trying to figure out the system that we're going to be under that's fair for people to be governed under, you know what I'm saying? Because you can't just go like anything goes and the strong survive, you know what I'm saying? Like it has to be, more to it than that. So I think that this system is not necessarily like I feel like we just need more involvement.
Yeah. We do need. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say also, I mean, not even just on those levels too, but also local, local elections. looking at, how a city is run. For example, those are elected positions. How is that city spending funding that's meant for community, for the people? Looking at the budget, or at least hearing from community organizations and listening to them, and they're saying, hey, there's a problem, maybe we need to listen.
Yeah.
And they're going to be able to educate you, shows like this, other situations and community meetings and so forth, but let you know who's in these positions currently, what they're doing, and then you can go from there as far as, okay, well, wait a minute, this person just got a whole bunch of money, and yet they're this city or whatever, and not much is really going towards community.
Right.
A lot is going towards other things, but the community is in need and the community is hurting. Who's the ones that makes the decisions as to how the money is spent? It's these elected officials.
Right.
And so it comes down to that as well. All those programs for rental assistance, food assistance, and so forth, that comes from, a lot of times the federal government, which is passed down to, the state, then passed down to the city. People are still hurting. People are still in need. And how are these elected officials acknowledging that? If there's the resources and there's a way to help, what are they doing? So I think looking at it from that standpoint too is also important as to why we need to pay attention and why we need to vote.
I also say, in having these conversations, such as the platform like this, such as those community discussions, I don't attend church as much as I used to, but I used to love going to church because you used to have city council representatives come there and people tell you how you felt about stuff. It was a big community base, but we are so scattered in this space, right? And they've taken a lot out of our community. But having these conversations aren't just good for us as people that live in the city. They're also good for the people that live out there in Spokane County. The Black folks that are out there in Vancouver, the Black folks that are out there in those small towns where the population of Black folks is maybe 60, or two, right? But it gives that conversation of us finding ways to try to show up for them, or trying to have conversations with some of those community members, because I just think about those. We think we're impacted here in these bigger cities that we have out here in King County. God knows how somebody out there that is Black and brown, that has been going down the prison pipeline since 14 and is 50 years old and can't leave the county, has to sit inside a jail because of certain policies that they have written up into that space. What about that Black grandmother down in Vancouver that has a grandchild but really can't be labeled as a foster parent, but kinship care can't be labeled so that grandma can't get the funding as opposed to a white person that adopts our Black children. Just throwing that out there because it's a big discussion. That's a part of some of the policies that kind of need to be implemented in the space so we can be able to have a conversation, better advocate for our community members.
So for me, I'm solution oriented. You know what I'm saying? And so like, I like to try to take the larger picture and bring it down. And so you pointed out again some very key positions, and I feel the need to one have a space to where we can get these stories in, you know what I'm saying, to where we can say, hey, these are the issues and these are the people that this is affecting, and how do we, because like you said, we're spread out, but then when you go to like a to a senator or a congressperson, they want to know that you have people behind you, you know what I'm saying? So if I go to, I'm just using it as an example, but it's a real story. If I go to Mike Pelletiati, you know what I'm saying, be like, Mike, my car got stolen. And, when I called the tow truck people, or when the tow truck people called me, they called me at 1 o'clock in the morning and gave me an hour to come get my car. And by the time I went down there, they had already told it, and for just it being there for 4 hours, I had to pay $700. That had to be some type of, price gouging or something. You know what I'm saying? My car was stolen. Like, I'm the victim. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, okay, Lamont, you're one person. You know what I'm saying? So not to say that it's not important. You know what I'm saying? But I have, thousands of little things like this. You know what I'm saying? And so then it's like, how do we come together as a fist and say, hey, as a collective, these are the issues that are affecting our people. You know what I'm saying? And we want policies around it, because Felicia spoke on money, taxpayer dollars that is allotted to help different things in different organizations. And so I feel like part of it is what we're doing with the Black Collective, but just more specifically, I feel like, again, shout out to Converge Media, you know what I'm saying? Like, just making it a movement, you know what I'm saying, of Seattle, your sphere of influence, Tacoma, our sphere of influence out there in between, right? And then just like, hey, this is a Zoom meeting with how many ever people on here, you know what I'm saying, collectively, and we're trying to come together and collectively bargain for our people, you know what I'm saying? And I just feel like until then, they just be playing with us. You know what I'm saying? Like, we just be marching and they'll give us a little something. And then, but we have to make a concerted collective effort, I feel like everybody should be sharing this, you know what I'm saying? And we should be collectively coming together like, hey, even Converge Media, you know what I'm saying, doing something with them, doing something with who I listen to in the morning, KRIZ, you know what I'm saying? I like listening to them. Community Potpourri. You know what I'm saying? I like Community Potpourri. Yeah. I listen to. I'm a regular caller every morning. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So I just would like to see us. It just, before we came on, you was like, how are you doing? I was like, I'm just tired of the bickering. You know what I'm saying? I'm tired of, this person don't mess with this person. I'm tired of, you know what I'm saying? Oh, it's about this agenda. And so, we all have what is near and dear to our hearts. You know what I'm saying? Let's figure it out. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of the stuff overlaps. We want safety. We want economic equality. But for these things that we want, we have to be willing to come together ourselves to get them. You know what I'm saying? We can't just say, hey, you guys give this to us, because they're not going to organize this. They're just going to pick certain people and give it to them. But go ahead.
Right. Well, that's the thing. That's what happens a lot, right? I remember a couple of years ago, for me, there was an organization I used to be like, oh man, they're this way, and they don't see the bigger picture. And now that I have I took a month off and had to work on my own wellness, but now I'm coming back into that space like, hey, what they're doing, it's not to say I don't agree with the work that they're doing. I agree with the work that they're doing, but how can we add on to build our own table with what they're doing and what we all can do? I spend a lot of time, and this is just to keep it real, I spend a lot of time kind of attacking some organizations because they have not yet unlearned the behavior, right? And I'm not doing that anymore. Because at the end of the day, what I want to do is continue to show up for them, and eventually they will get it. But in the meantime, I will not spend so much time down in another Black organization. You know what I mean? Because I've done it. I've been guilty of that. Because what we all need to be doing, as you stated before, is coming together to figuring out, well, if you're great in the area of business, and this person's doing the real estate, and this person's dealing with housing, we should be meeting quarterly. And then we can bring in those city council representatives so we can talk about those impacts. And this person's working in foster care, and we can bring that in. We can bring the youth in and have a youth day where we're not just sitting out there passing them backpacks, right? Because it goes beyond the backpacks, because some of them don't have any homes to go into. So what is really impacting them? Do they know how to use Narcan? Because there's overdoses happening inside of their schools, and the teachers don't want to talk about that. But how do we create policy with that? How do we invite them in on the conversation? Because they may think that they're grown, but they need to be able to have that grown person's conversation to save a life. Those those, but keep in mind, they're not implemented into the schools. Narcan's not implemented in the schools. Like that's part of safety isn't implemented in there, but we need to be having those types of conversations. Sorry, that's kind of soapbox.
Yeah.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Shout
No,
out
no,
to
no, no.
Care Washington, though. You know, they're really doing a lot of work as far as making sure that Narcan and stuff like that is getting out there throughout the community.
What's that? What's Narcan?
Narcan is the medication that helps to basically flush your system of any and all drugs. So if somebody is having an overdose, it helps to flush out those drugs out of their system.
Yeah, and so to your point, Deontay, the thing of it is, bro, is one of those things where when you go like, and it's funny because you say the school, because I started my avocation at the school. You know what I'm saying? I started at the school board. I was knee deep. I was volunteering like daily at my son's middle school. You know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna be honest with you. Good luck. You know what I'm saying? Because that system is and so the only thing that I left there with was I have to rally the troops. One of the shout out to the principal at Illy at the time. Um, he a brother. He didn't get no, like, they acted like he was not the principal. You know what I'm saying? They acted like the assistant principal was the principal. You know what I'm saying? And I just felt bad because they put him in charge, but it was like the teachers didn't have to um go to the employee meetings because it wasn't paid, so they weren't showing. You know what I'm saying? It was just they were it was just real disrespectful to me. You know what I'm saying? And I just was like, you know what? It's not gonna happen like that, bro. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna have to have like um after school programs. You know what I'm saying? Before school programs, we're gonna have to build this ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Because the fight back is so tough because it's public, right? And so this other parent can say, "Hey, I don't want my child learning that." You know what I'm saying? I don't want my, and so that's where the fight. And so now we're just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You know what I'm saying? And so I found that it was the work, it was the behind the scenes work. You know what I'm saying? It was the, like, trying to recruit to the for the PTSA. Like I tried to, I was the president of the PTSA, and they had me chasing my tail. You know what I'm saying? Like they wasn't trying to help. They was really trying to make it to where I wasn't successful. And when you get into that realm, it gets real political. And so what I found was they have a teachers union, they have a police union. We need a citizens union. You know what I'm saying? We need a parent union. You know what I'm saying? Like that was the only way that I saw that we can combat it, because the way that the system was built, like they'll move people around like musical chairs. You know what I'm saying? Like the principal, the vice, even the teachers, they're moving around like musical chairs, and then it's not what it used to be, and it's like, yo, I got to start all over again. You know what I'm saying? And so, um, like I said, I always look at the solutions, and so I just envision, just from us having this conversation here, I envision like the leaders in Seattle, the leaders in Kent, the leaders in all of these different areas to come together and just discuss possible solutions of how we can do. Because like what you said, like you got a nonprofit that's doing this over here, you got a nonprofit that's doing this over here. How come we can't come together and work together to build our community? And at the end of the day, like, I remember I was talking to a PI nonprofit that's in my same cul-de-sac where the school's at, and they were like, "Yeah, the Black Collectives helped us start this." You know what I'm saying? And they are flourishing. When I tell you they're flourishing, they didn't took over like half the building already. You know what I'm saying? Like they keep growing. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, yo, how come we ain't? You know what I'm saying? Like what's going on to where, And so we really have to um I feel the need for, if we're gonna ask for reparations, if we're gonna ask for help, I feel the need for mental health. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel that we need to heal ourselves mentally. we are like mentally sick right now. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, you know, you talk to a person and it's like, man, get involved in your community, and it's like they're already checked out. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like it's already, you know, like there's nothing I can do. This is just the way it is. And when they see me, like when I ran for office, it's $165 to get on the ballot. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? You don't even have to have a picture. And so, like what you were saying was like we need more people running for office. We need more people that is out here like Jesse Johnston, Jamila Taylor, uh, uh, Claire Wilson, that's telling us how this thing works. You know what I'm saying? So that way we can see the win. We can see, okay, this is how you change the how police get hired policy. You know what I'm saying? This is how you change the policy, because I'm gonna tell you, when you go into these schools, man, it's scary. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And when I say scary, not scary for me, because I'm not, I don't like these little dudes, I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, it's not that I'm invincible. It's I'm not scared of you. It's Bernie Mac. You know what I'm saying? We ain't scared of you. You know what I'm saying? Like for real, for real. Like, boy, if you don't sit down and pull your pants up, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's I love you, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not telling you this because I'm attacking you. I'm telling you this because I care and how you view yourself. You know what I'm saying? You're willing to throw everything away when you don't value who you are. You know what I'm saying? And so we have to show these kids, not just our kids, you know what I'm saying, like why they're on the drug. They think it's cool. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? They think that this thing is the thing to be. You know what I'm saying? And so when we're talking about policies, when we're talking about the school district and things of these nature, we should be saying, hey, has anybody went in and talked to these kids about mental health?
Yeah.
Like I literally, oh, go ahead. Were you gonna say
No,
something?
no. I was gonna say, that there is an organization out here that's doing that right now.
Okay. Okay.
It's called Washington Therapy Fund. What
Hmm.
that program does is it gets Black youth as well as adults free therapy, Black youth, right? And they are also matched with a Black therapist, and are able to attend to that at no cost to them. And at the end
Where
of the
where
day,
where where where's that at? What area?
it's in the whole throughout the whole state, throughout the whole
It's so
state.
it's in all the schools around here?
No, we reached out to every school district within the state, to provide the resource. So either way, like I'm not saying like it's a resource that we can continue to try to pour into the
No,
school.
I wanna know how to support it. You know what I'm
Oh
saying?
yeah, oh
I'm
yeah,
with
oh yeah. I can I
yeah.
can I can send you some information. Ashley Adair does amazing work. I'm also on that. I'm the vice president of the board, and
Are you able to
I
put
can
that
do.
in the chat,
Yeah,
Felicia?
yeah, absolutely. I can put that in there because I know that you guys have a program, not to plug the other program, but want to plug the other program. You guys are going to have a discussion on Black men mental health, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yes, we've
Uh,
talked about that. Yeah. So we're plugged in with that, Lamont. We're definitely working on getting things going with that. And the men's, yeah, like you're saying, Deounte, Men's Mental Health Mondays is coming up. So working together on that is going to be a really, really dope thing. And I love to hear that there's opportunity for children to get mental health services in school. Recently, I've heard of several students throughout different school districts having issues accessing therapy services. I know way back in the day, they used to offer counseling, right? Like you could actually go to a real therapist, counselor at the school and have, you know, routine sessions or whatnot. And from what I've heard, they're not offering that anymore. They can only come in for certain things, and it's every once in a while. And like I said, this is different school districts. Everybody kind of operates a little different. But I was really disappointed to hear that there's been so much funding cut from schools and supporting things like this. That now hearing that there's an avenue for these kids to be able to get the help that they need and the support that they need. That's so dope. I love it.
Yeah, I think so again, is you know, when it comes to this stuff, man, like, and that's the frustration with the federal government is you know, when you have things that's working, we can't afford to be like, oh yeah, we don't have the funding for this. That was one of the things with the school district that made me so mad, because it was just always appreciate you. Can you post that, Felicia, to the yep. And so, um, like, the way that we would think is, though, we don't have the budget for it. But it's like, yeah, we can't afford to not give these kids this. You know what I'm saying? So it's not, we don't have the budget for it. How do we get the money for it? And so the way that the school district is tied up, they get state funding and then they get federal funding, and they don't get money from the city. And so I was wondering why that was. And it was like, oh, because they get state, and there's some type of stipulation that prevents the city from giving money to the school district. You know what I'm saying? And so it just was like, you know, that's why I vote. You know what I'm saying? Because we don't understand how these situations work. You know what I'm saying? And so, to Deaunte's thing, I gotta tap in with that, because I'm telling you, when I go into these schools, I was just showing somebody the other day. I was at actually, but a couple months ago, I was at Federal Way High School, and it looks like a prison. You know what I'm saying? And literally, like, if you look at the cafeteria area, you know what I'm saying, when you first walk in, it's the offices and it's like the overseers, and they're looking down into the bowl. You know what I'm saying? And I was sitting there, and I'm showing, and so I showed some of my students what a prison looked like. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, look, side by side, it looks like a prison. You know what I'm saying? And it just was like, yo, this is crazy. So we're literally preparing these kids subliminally, you know what I'm saying, for something that a lot of them, according to the way it's going, will see these facilities. You know what I'm saying? And so when I look in and I go in, I'm like, nah, we have to um we have to be on the planning boards of when the schools get built. You know what I'm saying? We have to be on like, take control of the curriculum. Like Kent, the teachers, we was in Kent earlier today. You know what I'm saying? These teachers have been on strike every year. You know what I'm saying? The one teacher was like, because if you look at public school, I want to say the max class size is like 31 kids. You know what I'm saying? The teacher said he had 43 kids. And he was like, we get a stipend for every kid that is over the 31, but I can't teach 43 kids. It's not even about the money at this point. You see what I'm saying? And so if the private schools are capped at 11 children per uh, uh, class, how are we expecting these teachers to do their job? You know what I'm saying? And so, like I said, every year Kent teachers are on strike. You know what I'm saying? Or some teachers in some area is on strike. You know what I'm saying? So are we really listening to what is needed?
Well, kind of to add on to that too, the whole thing with the charter schools. Um, you know, they finally said, oh, you can have charter schools. There are only so many slots. Who's applying for those slots, right? Who really knows about it? How can, people afford it? So there were all these hurdles, barriers. There's one in the CD. I forget the name. I feel really bad. But it is so great because the way that they've set up their curriculum it's very inclusive. They say instead of minority, they say global majority. And so they're really instilling a sense of pride and power into these students, as opposed to just, you're just a number, you're just a kid. It's like, no, you can do anything, and a sense of community as well. It is unfortunate, it's terrible actually, that they capped out the amount of charter schools that are available. Nobody else can apply to them, even though there's several slots that are still open, but they won't allow anybody else to continue to build on and or build out, because the time frame is closed. That legislation needs to change, because we can have schools that are better. We can have curriculums that are more centered around a global majority mindset, as opposed to this traditional whatever is being put out there. But it's going to take a change in legislation for them to open that back up, for us to be able to have more charter schools with the smaller class sizes and more of a family community feel.
I believe that school is, well, the Summit, and I know it's like First Start or First School or something. Either way, there's only a couple of ones in Central District I remember, but I completely agree with that. I think that also I think that one of the things about it is, and it takes community conversations with teachers outside of, in the summertime, there has to be a space where we're inviting those teachers while they're on their break to let us know what they need. Because at the end of the day, if they're coming in to the school and policy has not changed for them, and then they're coming back in and they're coming back into the school with that type of energy, where they don't feel safe, how do you think that they're teaching your children? And that's not to take away from the teachers, but I'm just keeping it real. I done came into work mad and didn't get everything that I needed, and my energy didn't match, right? So how could I think that they would feel, right? You know? Can't hear you, Lamont.
No, I said we all human. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
for real, for real. And so we expect these teachers to go here. I'm not gonna lie, man. Listen, what I saw, like, I challenge anybody to go and volunteer in the schools, man. What I saw, it was on both ends. Like, I saw teachers that were getting, like, I seen this little girl, man, you know what I'm saying, sister girl. She stood over the teacher, like, with like bucking up on him. And he like cowered. And I was like, look, if you don't sit down, you know what I'm saying? Like for real, like, it's a cultural difference. Like, there's a lot of things that's going on in the class. Like, numerous classes, I had to like stand up and say, I apologize on behalf of all the parents, because I know that they do not know that their children are acting like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, I wish that I could film this class, you know what I'm saying, and show the parents what they're, because I even had one little girl, like, I caught her, like, I would catch the parents out, like, on the school, on campus somewhere. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, I used to do the traffic stuff in the morning. So I'm seeing you when you drop the kids off. I'm like, oh, that's your mom right there. Oh, that's your dad right there. Oh yeah, let me tell you. You know what I'm saying? So I caught one little girl, mom, and I was like, your daughter is acting up in school, and she was like, no, not my daughter. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm in the class. You know what I'm saying? It's your daughter. You know what I'm saying? And so the very next day, that little girl was at the front of the class with her, with like, and then her friend, which I guess they live by each other, Rachel, Rachel. I'm like, leave her alone. Why? Because she's trying to learn. Rachel. I'm like, chill. You know what I'm saying? And the little girl is trying to learn, but I'm like, if I wasn't there, the teacher is not controlling that. You know what I'm saying? And so that little girl eventually is going to succumb to that peer pressure, because there's no control in the classroom. You know what I'm saying? He was
Right.
a first year teacher. You know what I'm saying? And he was taking classroom management uh uh classes on the weekend. He was paying for it out of his own pocket. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, yo, this is crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to pay for this out of your pocket. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not offering this to you, you know? And so, like I said, maybe there's programs, because when I did talk to the principal, he was like, there were programs that in situations that they could, but I'm not going to lie. I said this, I said, it does not make sense that he does not meet with other math teachers, you know what I'm saying, and bounce ideas off of them. The very next year, they had a planning period where the teachers in their respective subjects got together. That was just from a parent saying, hey, this is not working. Like, we gotta figure, you know what I'm saying? And so that's why I say more people got to get involved. It's not just like we sending our kids to school. It's not just like we expect the government to just do whatever they supposed to do for us. We have to make that stuff be done. This is why I vote. This is why I get involved. You know what I'm saying? And so at the end of the day, like, I like that idea. You know what I'm saying? I like the idea of inviting the teachers and having a, parent teacher cookout or something like that, where we could talk to the teachers. You can get to know the teachers and be like, yo, I'm such and such parent. You know what I'm saying? If you have any trouble out of them, feel free to, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And I ain't gonna lie, I would like to even see a parent, like, task force, like, monitoring the school, like, just walking around
Yeah.
and like some classroom, like, hallway monitors and stuff like that. Because it's different. Imagine seeing
Yeah.
your
I,
homie's parent or your parent walking the hallways.
Yeah,
Right. Because I
I
know
see.
I would have been scared. I would
Right,
have been
right.
like,
But the thing about it is, we used.
"Ooh, not my first mama. Oh Lord, no, don't tell my mama no."
I went
There's that fear there. It's
yeah,
different.
I went to Washington Middle School, and I just this is a small story, but I went to Washington Middle School, and everybody, little did I know, everybody there knew my dad, and that was, and just every time I messed up, I'll be cutting up in the class, go to the next class, think it's all good. He's waiting right there, you know. But that type of community access is what we need, and still just finding ways to better protect each other. We are all your child is not the same student that's going back to school after this pandemic and racial injustice. You are not the same parent after all the things that have been impacting us in the community. These teachers are not the same teachers as they were since these things that have impacted us. We have all went through a space of trauma through the impacts of COVID. And it's been really hard to try to find out how to balance all that. Even hell, with myself personally, so God knows how a teacher would feel. 30 kids, one class, 30 kids, another class, 30 kids, another class. One 40-minute break. You got to probably handle your own personal stuff. Then you got 4 other classes after that. Got to break up a fight in 2 of your classes. Those, I don't know. My heart just goes out to a lot of the teachers out there, but what policies that can come to where if Ken is going on strike every other year, what are we doing wrong?
Right.
So that's just how I look at it.
Well,
I
I
feel
look at
like,
it from like a
you know,
stability standpoint too. Like if there's a principal who, is doing great, and then all of a sudden, let's say, a child growing up, they don't have stability in their home, but school is that stability place, right? Seeing that principal that they've connected with, or teacher that they've really connected with over, a couple years, now all of a sudden they're gone too.
yeah,
It's that part also. It's voting and making sure that, hey, where are people talking about putting money once again? If there's a levy that comes up, a lot of times schools are supported by levies as well. If there's a levy that comes up, look into it. They're asking for, 10 more cents on your taxes or whatnot, right? You're like, oh, God, another 10 more cents. But that 10 more cents could go to making sure that these kids have after school programs. Or it could be, that they're asking for more money for something else. It's important to know, though, what you're voting on. What is that levy about? And what is it really going to be going towards? So that these schools are supported.
I think so yeah, I think in closing up, you know what I'm saying? Because like I don't want to go too long, but 2 things that you guys said, right? One, we have to explain what charter schools is, you know what I'm saying? Because I have people that, again, on that same radio station that I was talking about, there's people that hops on there and they're like, hey, the charter schools are taking money from the public schools, you know what I'm saying? Or the charter schools are going to be we're not going to be have access to the charter schools. They're going to be for other um um populations that don't necessarily need them, meaning like rich people can start charter schools and then we can't get into them or whatever the case. That's what they were saying, as far as like it's for everybody. So when it's talking about charter schools, it's not just for certain, everybody's going to have the ability. So like to your point, I mean, why not open it up and let people do what they're gonna do? We have like it's like a homeschool type of situation, but it's a homeschool curriculum, but she does the education or whatever. But yeah, I don't think people really know what charter schools are. And so when that comes up, that's what I'm saying. Like when we're talking about legislation, when we're talking about changing things, like people really don't know. Like you said, levies. Like I remember going to the Federal Way School District, and my rest in peace, Roger Freeman, he said, follow the money. And so I went to the Federal Way School District to ask them for the budget. And as soon as I go to the lady, she says 94% of the budget is people. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, okay. So basically you're gonna put people out of their jobs if you so when we're talking about levies and stuff like that, where's the money going? You have like a lot of top heavy, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of factors that go into this thing, you know what I'm saying? So again, I think at the end of the day, it's educating the people on the process and what's going on. I think a lot of people they're not connected to the process because they don't know what's going on. It's like, oh, the levy, they want to hike up my my property tax, but then it's like, okay, well, I live in an apartment, so that don't affect me, so it don't matter. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, it does, because your apartment complex is probably going to add that to your rent, and then, you know what I'm saying, like it does, everything affects everybody. And I think that people think like, oh, that doesn't affect me, or, you know, it affects me, so I don't want to do it. And so we have to have this conversation of, what is this for? Is this for the greater good? And then what's the breakdown of where this money goes after the fact? And I think after that, people will be like, okay, well, it's going with that. I can see the new school. I can see the new school buses. I can see the iPads that you guys got and things of that nature for the kids. Like, you can see that type of stuff. So again, I think it goes back to education, and it goes back to us informing the people. And so not going forward, but I'll let you guys finish off, but not going too long. But again, Deaunte, I would definitely like those ideas that you're talking about. We have to go past just talking about them. You know what I'm saying? And try to go into implementation of these different things. Do we want charter schools? Okay, let's go after them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Do we
Well,
we want mental health?
right.
Go ahead.
Well, the thing about it is too, right? Because I have talked about it for a while, right? But at the same time, do we feel safe when we do have conversation with constituents and people that are writing these policies? Because they come into the room with us sometimes throughout the whole year. Sometimes they might meet with us quarterly. Sometimes they might meet with us every 2 years, and they check us off the box. And they say, oh, I'm going to implement this in with you. And then when the policy gets up there to Olympia, we're etched and sketched out. Or when they're running for different
or it's
offices.
carved out so much that we don't even recognize it anymore.
Right.
So absolutely.
So I agree. And so what I think our follow-up game is poo. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like we really we're rah, but then we drop the ball when, you know what I'm saying? And so that's why I vote. You know what I'm saying? Because we're holding these people accountable. Like, I know, so I'll give you another example. I'm in Tacoma, you know what I'm saying? I'm at Norm Dix was the representative, and he was holding a rally, and we just was there. Like, I didn't know, it was like one of my first political, you know, events, and I didn't know what to expect. So we just was listening. And a lot of his constituents were ex-military. And, you know, the lady got up and she was like, you know, you guys keep letting sexual offenders out, because I didn't know that Tacoma was getting paid to take sexual offenders from other cities. You know what I'm saying? And so yeah,
Wait
they
a minute,
do
I
this.
didn't even
Like,
know that.
yeah, so I want to say Puyallup is supposed to be getting paid to take homeless people. You know what I'm saying? Like, cities be making deals to do stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so the city don't even know. And my homegirl's brother got killed because a sexual offender had got off on a technicality, reoffended, and was running from the police and ran into him. You know what I'm saying? And killed him. So we're at this event, and the lady says, "This is you know, you guys, you know, keep messing up with these sexual offenders, whatever." He was like, "Oh yeah. I know your issue. Go see my secretary on Monday morning, and she'll take care of you." A couple of other people got up. He was, "Oh yeah, I know." But then these people got up, and they was like, "Norm, we know what you voted on. You voted against this. You voted against this." And he started getting red. And then the lady, she's crying, and then she sat down, and then another dude got up, and he was like, "And we know what your voting record is." And so these people were informed. And what I saw, he didn't hit them with the, you know, go see my secretary on Monday. He didn't hit them with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they let him know that, you know what, you are up when you're up for election, it's gonna be, you know what I'm saying? Like, don't look to be there again. You know what I'm saying? And that's the type of, that's what they understand. They don't understand, you know, oh, this is what I want. Okay, that's what you want. Did you email us? Did you put in the email? You know what I'm saying? Did you put in the paperwork to actually get it? Because we don't understand how the process works. So people like yourself, people like us, Black Collective, and anybody else, we have the responsibility to get this information out to the rest of the public. You know what I'm saying? And so I appreciate you, good brother. You know what I'm saying? And
Thank you.
how can we tap in with you and what else do we need to know to support? You know what I'm saying? So we can rally the troops.
Well, there are two things. You know, I'm also with an organization called Build outside of Vocal. So we do Build the Vote. I'll put that in the chat. And that gives you an opportunity to vote. If you need us to come volunteer to get people to sign up to vote, or have community discussions about that, I can do that. But even in the areas of Vocal, we have community conversations that we're discussing with different organizations, different city council representatives about policy and housing, different policies with community navigators, different areas of advocacy for community members. I want to come to the community members. We also pay a small stipend for community members and pay them for their time for doing that. But feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat as well. Please feel
Absolutely.
free. And when you don't think it's for you, it's for you. If you're that case manager that needs to get, and you have children, you have youth that are needed to be heard, and keep on having issues with court, come to us. We do advocacy as well. So just give
Absolutely.
us an opportunity to show up and show out. And above all else, give yourself the opportunity to know that your vote matters, that you count. And once your vote
Absolutely.
counts, then we start to do more groundbreaking SH, you know, when it comes to advocating for our community members. So
1000%. And I do want to say, though, this little disclaimer that we are not endorsing any candidates. It is election time, so we are not endorsing anybody by, listing out names or, throwing shade at any candidates. We're just having conversation and education.
Absolutely.
The different topics. So thank you all so much. This has been great. And we are going to continue this on. So please continue to check us out every Friday at 7 o'clock. So
thank y'all.
and
Hey, thank you. Hey, thank you, bro. Thank you for coming on. And we're definitely gonna tap in, bro, because
Yeah, we
like I
need
said,
to
we got
tap in because I need a lineup, because my brother pushing my lineup
Hey,
back.
that's what I do, man. That's what I do. But definitely, bro, I promise you, I watch you on social media, and it's inspiring to see the talent and the people that we got going on out here that's putting in the work. So we just want to help support, and we're gonna get in these schools and in the community and make a difference. That's for sure.
Well, I appreciate you very much, brother. Thank you very much, sister,
Absolutely.
for allowing me to come in here. And everybody else, have a blessed night.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Felicia.
thank you. Appreciate y'all.
Have a good night.
Bye.